Welcome back to Bobbin Around. We are here for season 2. My name is Xochil. I'm here with my co-host Michael, and we've got a very special guest joining us today. But we're excited to kick off another season of amazing interviews, bobbing around the industry.
Thanks, Xochil. Yeah, it's been a few months, but in a good way. We've both been extremely busy. There's a lot going on in the industry right now, and we are blessed to have Yohannan join us today, both to kind of talk about his path, the path of the Columbus Fashion Alliance, and then the exciting grand opening of their new facility that SPESA has the pleasure of getting a soft launch at our Advancements in Manufacturing Technology Conference, which is April 13th and 14th. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's get into it.
Very excited to get to Columbus.
Oh, yes.
I have never been there before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We are first time.
You have been an incredible ambassador for Columbus, so I'm excited to kind of get to know your history there and kind of what kept you in Columbus, because you've been there for a minute.
Yeah. Well, Well, I'm excited to be here. I'll tell you guys that. I'm excited about SPESA and the conference coming to Columbus, and we're definitely excited about hosting at the Loom, which you guys will get a sneak peek at a construction site basically, but it's going to be a good time. We're going to have a good time and talk about the future of manufacturing and things like that. But yeah, excited to have this conversation with you both.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate the construction site part, because honestly, the only thing, the thing worse than going into a construction site is going to a factory that hasn't changed anything in 40 years. So if you're doing construction, That means you're improving. So I'll take that as a good sign.
Yeah, and it actually won't be the very first construction site that SPESA has attended during our conference. So you'll be in good company, actually. Tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the Columbus Fashion Alliance and what's the history? How did it start? What's the mission for those of us listening that don't know about it?
Yeah, so the Columbus Fashion Alliance is pretty much an organization that is facilitating and driving what is called the Columbus Fashion Initiative. And so the Columbus Fashion Initiative is an economic development strategy that we built starting around 2018. And it's really aimed at taking the large fashion ecosystem that currently exists in Columbus and really democratizing it so that we can create that next generation of impact through the fashion industry that's there. And so for those who may be watching this that don't know, Columbus, Ohio has the third largest fashion ecosystem and industry in the country, next to New York and LA. And so we have the largest collection of fashion brand headquarters based in Columbus. We have the third largest amount of designers based in Columbus. We also have the #1 fashion logistics hub here in the country, right here in Columbus, Ohio. And there's a bunch of other stuff too. The industry that's built around that ecosystem is also very strong and growing, from educational partners to manufacturing partners to supply chain and logistics. We have a lot of that here, and a lot of talent that has come here to Columbus from decades ago still lives in the city. And so you have a talent-rich, historic, legacy of fashion here in the city, and it's really never been told. And we're doing our best now to tell that story, and also to, not only drive that next generation of it, but also think about it differently, right? And we said, going into our mission in this initiative, we said we don't want to just create the same pattern of things that are being done, right? Since we're, starting this next chapter, let's start it in a way that's going to be positive. And so our role is, and our job is, a mission is to create positive change for the people and the planet through fashion. So we're highly aware of how fashion can be used to help individuals, from young people in educational pathways all the way to workforce development when it comes to manufacturing, and also around sustainability and circularity. So that's kind of the way we're approaching it. And we're trying to have fun on the meantime while we're doing it too. It's a lot of hard work, obviously, to, uplift an industry in a city that too many people don't know about. And so we're creating awareness about Columbus, but we're also creating awareness about this industry. And, so it's a lot of work, but we're enjoying it though.
That's awesome. I can guarantee you that at least 20% of the people listening to this podcast immediately Googled, is Columbus really the third largest hub in the country?
Yeah, Google it.
I'm excited to get into that
definitely
with
jealous
you.
of that.
It
You can
really is.
Google
It's
it.
baffling.
You can chat GPT it. You can look it all up. It's in there. Yeah.
But I love it because, again, like we've done events in LA, in New York. The reception that we've had in Columbus is outstanding. Like it's, I make the tongue in cheek joke of like, maybe there's nothing else to do in Columbus because we've had so much interest in people coming. Now I know that's not true because I actually really enjoy Columbus and there's plenty to do in Columbus. But there's a type of passion that definitely separates itself from places like New York and LA and other hubs in the country. So the worst thing you could possibly be is the best kept secret. So I'm happy to at least try and break a little bit of that secret away so people can appreciate what's happening in Columbus right now because there's a lot going on. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of big companies that bring in big talent. But that then, what you're doing is, okay, you've got all this talent here, but, big companies are known to be protective of both their technology, their IP, and their personnel. And so how do you get, some of these protective corporations to really democratize the information and quality that they share? So before we get into that, I wanted to kind of a little bit more about CFA. I don't know if many of us can remember 5 years ago what happened in 2020, but that's when you opened CFA.
Yeah.
So not the easiest time in the industry to start
No.
an association. You in previous interviews, you lost funding, had to cancel events. So even you said you tried to get this idea killed as many times as possible. So, what was that process like, opening it at a time like that? And then now you're moving into a massive new facility with millions in funding and really seems to have, taken that right turn. So what was that process like?
You're right. It was not easy starting. And, I tell this story often, but our first event was a mixer. That was the first thing. And we were just starting by like our phase one of the initiative was just to build community, right? It was just really for us to start connecting with each other to say, hey, there's a huge fashion community here, but we all need to know each other. So our first event was a mixer and it was scheduled for March 19th of 2020. And so we were getting phone calls. We were getting phone calls the week before from people saying, "Hey, are you still going to have that mixer?" And we're like, "No, we're not gonna do the mixer, guys. We're gonna hold off on that." And I would say a few weeks later, we were in conference rooms, or actually it was virtual calls back then. We're in virtual conference rooms with about 20 other civic leaders saying, "Okay, we need thousands of masks for people because this COVID is really dangerous." And so we spent pretty much our first 4 to 5 months of existence making masks. We made about 70,000 masks, and we did it through an initiative was called Can't Stop Columbus at the time. And we actually worked with local vendors. So immediately we were connecting to the local, maker community saying, "Hey, how many masks can you make? How many can you make?" And then we realized that there were a bunch of independent, sewers and seamstresses who were also out of work and needed dollars at that time. It was crazy. And so we ended up hiring about another 20 to 30 more people and just saying, "Hey, how many, if you could turn off 500, we'll take it. If you could turn off 400. And so we ended up making about 70,000 masks, and we ended up putting thousands of dollars right back into the community. And that was our first really case study of proof of concept. We said, "Hey, this shows that fashion could be there for the city when it needs it, not just for fashion shows, but like when we need to make things, there's a community here who can make things." And that was really what gave me even more inspiration that we were on the right path and that we had something special.
That's so incredible to be able to do that, but also to like pull together all those resources like you described. The ecosystem is there and they just weren't connected. And now got forced to connect, right? For the common good, this cause.
Right.
Yeah, I think that time really showed. I mean, it kind of exposed a lot of weaknesses in the infrastructure of the industry, but then it also showcased the resiliency of the people in the industry.
Yes.
And that's what I always appreciate about that is like, they were willing to stand up and like do what needed to be done to try and keep people safe and really support the PPE, industrial complex. And so there's a lot of lessons learned, but there's a lot of hope that came out of that. So that's awesome that y'all were able to kind of take or do your part for that initiative.
Right. I think that was one of the things because, I noticed I'm excited about this conversation and talking about manufacturing, but that was also one of the first times that we started to look at how we could maybe approach manufacturing in the future because um, when COVID happened, that disruption of the fashion industry, even big box retailers, and specialty retailers, we know some CEOs that were running big, large fashion brands out of their home and we're doing, having their team drive by the house to take a look at samples, right? And they were running it like a startup. And I think that was a part of that shift in people's mindsets of, big systems and big, giant organizations having to reset and rethink how they do things. Why not rethink how we do things totally, right? And moving forward. And so that was one of the first times I started planting a seed to us to say, hey, we should probably look at how this ecosystem is going to be moving into the future and how we can maybe start to rethink bringing more of that, back to the US.
Yeah.
That's excellent too. Like sometimes you can't break people out of the systems that they've existed in until it gets broken. And however that outside force breaks it, it forces
Right.
them to relook at that situation and say, just because we've been doing this and it's working, like, is it the best way? And I think what you mentioned, like going back to that really entrepreneurial spirit and being scrappy because you have to, not because you don't have the money, but like just because you have to and you're forced into it, it makes you think differently.
Yeah. So give us a little bit more about Yohannan. Like originally from Akron, went to Ohio State and Columbus and never left. What
Yeah.
was the path that led you to where you are now?
Yeah. So yeah, originally from Akron, Ohio. Shout out to Akron in the building. Um, I came to Columbus, fell in love with Columbus. It was my first big city.
Yeah.
And, when I got to Columbus, I immediately started to find my way to get connected into the city. And I think one of the things that I have a passion for is building community. Actually, I know it. I love to build community. So when I first came to, Columbus, I was doing a lot of events. I'm an introvert, but I love gathering people and building community. And so that's my way of being out there. And so I was doing a lot of events and building community in different ways. And I've always been an entrepreneur. And so, coming from Akron to Columbus, experiencing the first time that I can expand my roots and grow in new ways, and I went to Ohio State University, and that was another opportunity for me to just see the world, see it differently. And coming from a small city like Akron, where you're not exposed to, a lot of different types of diversity and global perspectives and, different industries. And so that kept me in Columbus. But once I started getting engaged into like really engage in the city, really engage in the community, that's what kept me there. And so throughout my life, whether it's been events or media or branding, I started basically a marketing and branding consultancy about 15 years ago called Warhol and Wall Street, and that was really where I got to bring my creative side with my passion for strategy and solving problems together. And that's really my sweet spot as I've come to know myself as I've gotten older, that I love being a creative, but I also love strategically solving problems. And so that is where I started my agency, Warhol and Wall Street, from. And over 15 years, we have worked with so many different clients, but a lot of civic clients like our county, our city, our economic development partners. We were finding ways to bring the community along with big initiatives, whether it was zoning, housing, infant mortality, police community relations. We were that kind of connector between the people and these partners. And so that's when I really started to learn more about how cities are run, how industries are run. And through that work, I actually discovered um, how Columbus was the third largest fashion industry. And so that's what got me on that path. But I've spent most of my years in Columbus just trying to get involved and see if I can make something shake. And I think that's because ultimately I love big city energy. And
Yeah.
Columbus is one of those cities that is still growing. It's still like a younger city and it's still finding its kind of pulse and its heartbeat. And so I figured if I can be a part of that and I can help shape the city that I want to live in. Plus I had kids, so I couldn't really go far. I couldn't really go too far, you know. So I
Yep.
figured I'd make the best out of it while my kids are here. Now my kids are grown, so I'm like, I gotta either make something happen or I'm out of here. And I'm, you know, luckily, but I'm bought in. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
I can appreciate that. So actually, I think you might have a fun answer for one of my favorite questions. I always have the joke of, when it comes to the textile fashion industry, you're either born into it or you're tricked into it. And so, I mean, you got a degree in psychology. Like, what you weren't born into the industry. How did they trick
Oh,
you into this industry?
who tricked you? Did you have like a
Yeah.
mentor or somebody who brought you into this sphere?
No, man, I'll tell you a funny story how I got into it. I was kind of, and I mean, I guess this could be tricked into it, but because a lot of people ask me, they say, you know, how did you get into fashion? And I've always been a good, I've always been a big fan of fashion, right? And so I remember when I was young, we grew up really, really poor in Akron, and one of my friends actually made some clothes for me. He was cutting some stuff up and put some stuff together. I remember I wore this outfit to the mall one day, and people were like, "Yo, that outfit was cool," and I felt cool that day. And I said, "Man, you know, if you got the right outfit on, you know, it could do a lot for your confidence." And so I always have been a fan and understand how fashion is really part of how you feel good about yourself and how you express yourself. But you know, strategy has been my thing, and so I was a part of a civic commission. It was for the mayor. It's called the Create Columbus Commission, and that is when I found out about Columbus being the third largest fashion industry in the country, and that was back in, I would say, maybe 2016. So you know, literally about 10 years ago. And when I heard that, the first thing I thought was, get out of here. We're not, this is not a fashion city. It is, New York, LA, maybe Chicago, maybe Miami. But then as I, learn more between the next year or so, I really started to get a bigger understanding. And, when you love to solve problems, especially like problems that can impact the community, you get that spark and you just kind of can't let that curiosity go. At least for that next couple of years, I was just super curious and I was having meetings with people that I knew that worked in retail, learning as much about it. And then one day we were at a festival, and this is where I got tricked into it. We're at a festival, and it's called Comms Fest. It's like a community festival. I mean, it's pretty fun. I mean, there's like people walking around with uh, faces painted, and there's like bands and it's like a jam band type of vibe. And I was there, and a friend of mine, his name is Traxler, and Traxler had a booth there, and he was selling T-shirts. He had a T-shirt company, Traxler Tees, back in the day, and we were talking about the fashion stuff, and he was like, "Hey, man, if you if you're gonna bring this, fashion thing to life, man, we should talk because," he said, "I got a license with Ohio State, and I need some sweaters, and I'll give you I'll buy them all from you." And I was like, and this is a community fest, so this is after a couple of beers and other stuff. We were having a good ass time. And so when he told me this, my business partner with Warhol and Wall Street was there at the time, and me and him kind of turned to each other, and we were like, we're just kind of feeling the whole contest energy. And I'm like, "Hey, man, I think we should do it." And he's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "All right, let's do it." And then that was it. And then the next thing you know, the next day, I was like, "We're going to start this organization and we're going to, and I kind of got swept up into it just because I thought I could make some money printing out these these sweaters for this guy who got his license and all the other stuff too as well. But it was really, it was really just kind of like that. And I was already curious enough about it. And I was like, okay, not only is there educational opportunities, but there's this manufacturing piece. And I'm thinking, holy crap, man, we can start making some cool stuff for people and not just these brands, but other people like Traxler. And I'm like, if he says it and he's already got a business and he's like, I need resources and I got opportunities, I'm like, how many other people are probably looking for the same thing? And so then that was it. That was pretty much it.
That's amazing. I love that story so much. That the opportunity just fell in your lap, kind of. But I mean, it could have just been something that dissipated and you were like, no, I'm going to figure out how to do this and make it happen. And I mean, you're so right. From every startup brand, but even not the startup brands, like brands who have been in existence, I think still have trouble pulling together all of the resources to help them grow. You hit points where you're like, kind of at a plateau and you're like, okay, I'm doing this really well, but I really want to do this. And how do I get to that next step? So I think that's really interesting to see that progression. How do you
Yeah.
see, I know, the fashion scene in Columbus and how that's evolved and grown, both the CFA side in the 5 years, but also just since you've been living in Columbus, like what have you seen?
Well, I would say since I've been in Columbus, fashion as it exists now, this is pretty much like our third or fourth generation of fashion. Um, Columbus historically has been a force in the industry for years, decades, I should say. So I would say it goes all the way back even to like the between the 30s to the 50s. We were the biggest manufacturer of shoes all the way up into the 70s. So there's a lot of buildings in downtown Columbus that used to be shoe factories. The building that we're moving into now used to be a linen factory. And then after the shoe kind of generation, we were a big manufacturer of women's dresses for a while. And so the linen factory and some other factories in Columbus were a big part of that. And then you guys know Lazarus, the department store.
Mhm.
They have their family is in Columbus, and that ties to Macy's and some other stuff that happened from there. And then the kind of, what do you call it? The L Brands, umbrella, began, but that was also based off of what was already here. So even with L Brands starting up in Columbus, it was because there was already an ecosystem of fashion and retail already happening here. And so there's been generations and generations of fashion in Columbus. And so today, I think, and this is kind of one of the reasons why we were, also inspired about doing this initiative is that, major retailers and fashion is just changing, right? Like, what we used to do, back in the day where the malls were the social media, right? You went to the malls to discover. And that is when, retail was as strongest because you went there to discover. So it could be a brand new store saying, hey, we're the brand new cool store. And you're like flooding that store to see what kind of pants, tops, and all those things and what they had. And so, you could create these narratives like Victoria's Secrets. That's a imagined story, right? That's a story of someone named Victoria, or even Abercrombie. Their Hollister. There was a story about a John Hollister, and that used to be how brands would come out those days. But nowadays, it's much more personal. And a lot of people want to connect with the founder. They want to know the owner. They want to know what the brand stands for. They don't want to shop, big as much anytime, but they want to just feel more connected to the brand. And so we looked at it and said, hey, we have a lot of specialty retailers in this market, and there is no ecosystem like New York and LA where they're tapped into trends here. They're tapped into a community that's kind of helping them think about innovation and things like that. It wasn't happening. So they were in those silos, and you could see the market as the market was changing. Ascena broke up and brands got sold off. Bigger brands closed down, had to reimagine themselves. So it was from a economic development standpoint, it was like if we don't reinvent this, then we could watch a lot of these specialty retailers pretty much fade to black outside of the bigger ones like Abercrombie and VS. And so those are jobs going away from our city. And so I knew that that had to be important to our city because that's jobs going away. But the talent is still here, and the opportunities are still here, and the infrastructure is still here. So we said, okay, if we can kind of grab the community right now before it gets too late and say, hey guys, like retailers, community, civic partners, let's reimagine what we can be when it comes to the fashion industry. Let's take a look at our assets and say, okay, what do we have that New York and LA don't have? Okay, we got logistics. We
Yeah.
can get things to 60% of the population faster than anybody, right? And
Yeah.
actually, L Brands built that because of they wanted to stay in Columbus, and they said, if you want us to stay here, we need to get our product out to the rest of the world quicker. So we have these other strategic advantages, and so that's kind of where the industry is at now. And then CFAs, as our part of it, we've been driving that conversation since day one. Talking to the brands, talking to the retailers, listening to the community, listening to the students. You had you have community members and creatives and future designers who want to stay here, but they believe that they have to go to New York and LA to get into the industry. And then you have retailers who want to hire locally, but there's no pathway. So it was just like you got the big wigs here, and you have the community and emerging brands here, and
Yeah.
there was no connection point. So we said, okay, we could serve as a convener for that. So over the past 5 years, we've been growing the initiative, connecting the community, hosting programming, teaching people how to do things like sew, how to print. We have $300,000 worth of equipment that people can come in, and once they learn how to use it, they can use it themselves and they can make their own shirts, sew their own dresses. We have community events. We have pitch competitions where we give away grants. We give away scholarships. We are partnering with the retailers now on recruitment strategies and curriculum development strategies so we can hire more locally. And then we're looking at manufacturing as a big initiative too as well. So as we go into this next phase with opening up the loom and kind of bringing that ecosystem under one roof, it's rooted in those kind of major things. It's end-to-end pathways is what we're calling it. And then there's also creating that hub itself to centralize the industry and actually start to give us a foundation for connecting with each other and creating what's next.
Nice. So how, like, as you mentioned, I mean, this industry can and is incredibly siloed, and those silos are hard to break down. I mean, but how have the big guys, the Victoria's Secrets, Abercrombie's, the DSWs, how have they embraced, your challenge? And have they, kind of opened up a little bit in order to kind of build that Columbus community?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. A lot of the bigger brands, they're publicly traded companies, and so they're first and foremost is that, are we operating sound? Are we making sure that the business is taken care of? And so they have their own challenges that they're facing in this in today's industry, right? And so there's a lot of focus on operations, a lot of focus on product and things like that. So what we understood is that we had to make sure that we were aligning ourselves right with the retailers in a way that actually made sense, and start somewhere, right? And so we started with like the ERG groups and making connections with the community partners within the retailers, right? And starting it, because half of my co-founders are from the retail industry. And so when you talk to the associates are like, hell yeah, let's go, right? Because a lot of them are
Yeah.
looking for what's new. They're looking for that community anyway. So from an associate level, we have plenty of interest from, that level. A lot of people are still involved. They're on our board. They run committees. But to get the bigger, decision makers to say, okay, let's go, and to actually have the brands be able to be present with us and figure it out together. We knew that's going to take time. And so we started that conversation out, and now we're actually moving into the space where we're much more aligned with the strategies of the brands. And so, for instance, if a strategy for Abercrombie is, if a strategy for, or just any big retailer is to hire locally because it reduces the cost of hiring from out, the coast and the recruitment and things like that, then we align ourselves with that and we say, okay, then how can we work with you to help create a pathway, locally, because you do want to hire locally, right? Or if there is, for manufacturing, for a good example, if there's an opportunity to do your samples and create innovative things in smaller batches here,
Yeah.
test it before you go into before you start shipping from all over the world, then is that a path that we can look at and say, okay, how can we start to pilot some things? And so we're starting to have the conversation with the big retailers now that are aligned to their initiatives and saying, how can we help solve problems for you? And that's creating opportunities for people here locally as well. So that's where we're at right now. And I think the reception has been well, to be honest with you. I think there is a level of excitement because we're starting to feel what a New York and LA feel, which is, New York and LA, you go to, say, New York, you go there for Fashion Week. When you go out to all the events for Fashion Week, you see reps from Calvin Klein, you see from other brands, they're all kind of hanging out and they're seeing what's going on. They're tapping into the community. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. And so for, Columbus, it's always been in silos. So there wasn't that. And I think now they're starting to feel like, hey, we do have some resources here. We do have a community that is talented. We do have some creatives and some talent that we could be, tapping into right in our own backyard, and that could help them out when it comes to overall success. So it's been good to start to crack through. And I think now, even with the loom and the building and having that hub to say there is a place now to go, I think that interest has even picked up even more. So we're starting to see some partnerships, which you may be seeing some partnerships coming up sooner than later when it actually relates to the loom. So just stay tuned for some big things that can be coming out of that.
Nice. Since you gave me the in, I got one more question. I'll let Xochil get us back on track. But you mentioned small batch manufacturing, which has always been kind of a passion project of mine. It's gone by many names, micro factories or on demand or whatever it might be. But that's always it's always been about this small batch manufacturing thing. But it's tough. It's really tough. Not necessarily tough to do. It's possible to do, but it's tough to kind of get that traction. And when I look at Columbus, like, you've got more distribution centers than anybody in the industry. I'm like, it's the perfect place for them to set up that small batch manufacturing in the distribution centers to do replenishment or to do repairs or to do whatever you need to do. But that small batch, like, if it's going to come back to the U.S., that's the way it's going to come back. It's not going to come back in the Chinese manufacturing mass production. It's going to be that small batch. And so, give us a little bit more of, like, how has that been, accepted within your community, and what's a big win for you down that path?
Well, Michael, actually, you're speaking my language right now. You're kind of tapping into, like, the energy I'm trying to tap into with our retailers in our city and our economic development partners. It is exactly to what you're saying, right? What we're currently looking at is we're looking at a couple of things, but to your point, we see a huge opportunity. That logistics hub, right? We built this logistics hub, which is now one of the biggest logistics hubs for fashion. I think 80% of international fashion flies through Columbus before it goes anywhere else. 80%. Wow. So companies from all over the world keep doing research, and the research says, oh, if you want to bring your business to America, bring it to Columbus. And because the logistics and the shipping and everything is right there. And so, to your point, if we can look at a strategy as a manufacturing community, if we can look at strategies that says, okay, how do we bring manufacturing back to the U.S.? I think it's a couple of things. I think, to your point, building small batch manufacturing right where the distribution is happening at, right? Not only can it help you with producing small enough batches and getting it out to the community quicker, it also can help you with things like repair programs. So you think about circularity, right? Yep. And so things that come across that are damaged, you can, boom, I'm either manufacturing it, I'm shipping it, it comes back, it's going to another department in the same building and getting repaired and getting shipped right back out, right? So I think circularity, I think small batch, I think logistics, all of that creates a perfect opportunity for us to say, okay, we can bring manufacturing back to the U.S. in some ways. Another way I think we need to think about it also is the cost of it, right? And when you look at, we know the real, we get beat out because we're getting beat out on labor costs in addition. And so what other markets do and other countries do is they still subsidize a lot of that. Now they have definitely terrible, unfair, like labor, issues going on, right? But there also is a financial commitment, right, for increase in market share. So a lot of those big manufacturing countries, they look at how do we subsidize this asset so that we can get as much market share as possible. Well, I believe if we could look at ways to subsidize manufacturing in the U.S. to lower the labor costs, it can allow us to employ more people and allow us to be able to create more product for these major retailers that is more affordable and allow us to gain more market share back in the U.S. So we've let the prices go so high in the U.S. that it's almost impossible for us to compete with these other markets. But this is where I feel like the government can step in and say, okay, if you want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., let's do it strategically. Let's look at advanced manufacturing. Let's look at some subsidies to get it there, right? And then let's get that market share. If we can get a small increase of percentage of market share from brands that are headquartered here, it's thousands of jobs, that's millions of dollars that's being put back into the community. So you don't even need to do all of it. But I think we as a manufacturing community can come together, and these kind of conversations that we're having and with SPESA coming to the market, I think it's the perfect time to look at how do we create alignment amongst all of us and say, okay, let's build some of these resources and let's talk to our civic partners and say, federally, can we get some dollars to pilot what it could look like to bring advanced manufacturing back with subsidies and logistics and advanced manufacturing and see what it does, Yeah. You got to start somewhere.
I love that. I've held that belief. I've held this belief for at least 20 years. So it doesn't matter who's in office, but when I look at tariffs, their main purpose is to discourage, foreign inputs. So if you use tariff revenue to support domestic industry, then it will accomplish that goal. Like that's the goal of
Yeah.
tariffs, is to bolster manufacturing through discouragement. But even before
Yeah.
Liberation Day, our industry was the highest tariffed consumer good industry in the world, for any industry. Now, I think I think apparel and footwear. Oh, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but it accounts for 17% of all imports, but 25% of tariffs. Like it's around that. And then again, before Liberation Day, the numbers are all out of whack now. I'm like, if we could, I'm not asking for a handout. I'm just kind of asking for our money back. Like we've been paying into this for a very, very long time. And we definitely have not gotten a lot of government support in terms of bolstering manufacturing in this industry for many reasons. But I'm like, if we could just get a little piece and we could build something great, especially now more than ever before, with technology and the capacity to be able to build the equipment and manufacturing process that we can today. We might not have been able to do this in 2000 or 2005, but we can definitely do it today.
Right.
And so I definitely agree with a lot of that. Again, not asking for a handout, just asking for our money back.
Right.
Some of those infrastructure investments. And I mean, in speaking to people in corporate design jobs, and the tariffs almost have to be like several 100% more for them to like ultimately make a switch just on cost, right? But if we can offer, the on-demand or the lower batch, quick manufacturing, I think that's, that's where we have an advantage, where you're not shipping things by boat or even by air and waiting, long lead times. We can bridge that gap. However, and I'm a huge fan of this too, by the way, but however, the workforce, skilled workforce continues to come up. I know Michael and I hear it constantly. I'm sure, honestly, you've heard it as much as we've had. Do you think that in Columbus specifically, like, do you have that workforce available, like a skilled workforce that can make not just T-shirts and like simple items, but can step up and make outerwear or, high fashion type of garments? In those low batches, because you have to know a lot of machines. You got to know how to assemble things, how to follow complicated tech packs, designs, things like that. Or do you think yes and no, but do you also think training programs? How is that the answer? What needs to happen to build that infrastructure?
Yeah, no, you're right on it too. Xochil, you're right on it. I believe that is one of the keys to unlocking this resource. And I learned that through some of the early work through CFA. I would say 2019, maybe 2020, when we were first getting started. Oh, that had to be, 2021. Actually, it's 2021. No, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. It was 2019. 2019, we had got a call as we were getting this thing started. Our economic development partners were like, "Oh, okay, you guys are fashion people. Well, we're having these conversations over here." And so there was a manufacturing company. It's now called BMC. You guys know BMC.
Yes.
Bespoke manufacturing. Okay, but before it was BMC, it was called something else. And we had got a call, said, "Hey, there's this company wants to look at Columbus as a location." And so I had gotten a call and got connected with the company back then. And I remember when we had this conversation, he said, "Okay, hey, we're looking at, we're gonna look at our second location for our manufacturing, and we're gonna need 50 sewers out of the gate, and we're gonna need about 50 sewers about 6 months later." And I said, "Okay, all right, I'll call you back." And so I went and I started asking around, like, "Hey, who's got 50 sewers? We need 50 seamstresses right now, blah blah." And then that's when I realized that there was some skills gap that we needed to look at. But what I found is that we have a community of makers. We just needed to convene them. We have a very diverse community here, right? You have tradespeople, you have craftsmen, you have people who knit, sew, and do all those things. You also have Abercrombie, who does a lot of their design, here in the market. And so they have a whole team of people that make a lot of their samples and things like that. And then you have, through the different nationalities that live in Columbus, you have sewing shops in the Hispanic community. You go to the north side of Columbus, you have the East African community. They have a lot of different sewing trades in their own stores and their own community around those skills. And then you have those kind of cultural skills they bring to the table too, like beading techniques and and embroidery techniques and all these other things. And so I started to identify this kind of rich, um, you know, culture of seamstresses and sewers, but it wasn't enough as a system, right? And so today, one of the things that we're piloting and we're working with Isaac on this program right now is called Rework. And Rework is a program that's going to be a stackable skills program that is actually funded by Franklin County. And so again, if you're going to get the skill of the skilled labor force together, that's going to meet the needs. If we could bring manufacturing here, you have to have the skilled labor to be able to fulfill those roles. And so what we're doing with the dollars from Franklin County, shout out to Franklin County, by the way, they're looking out for us, and they get it. But what we're able to do is do a earn to learn program where we are basically paying for people to learn these skills. So we're doing three levels of it. One is you're sewing. So we're working with Isaac on their federally recognized sewing skills trade certification. But then the next level of that is repair. So we're also we're going for a certification now in the repair space. And then the next level is remanufacturing. And so we're coming up with a really, really dope curriculum that is helping uh, us teach different techniques from screen printing to direct-to-garment printing to embroidery to even stamping and pattern making and other cultural techniques. So we're building a workforce that at each level they can get hired. So, you get your Isaac certification, you can go and get a job at Honda, helping in their plant or working in a different facility. But then your repair certification, that opens up another job opportunity for you. And that also allows us to start attracting other manufacturers who offer these services because we're building a skilled workforce for them. And then remanufacturing, because we see Columbus could be a huge player in upcycling and remanufacturing. And if you could do it well. So we've been out to LA, met with Sway, we've been out to other places and met with some of the, people that are leading in this space. And we're like, okay, could we create the workforce of the future that can make, repair, and remanufacture things through the subsidies that we have with Franklin County as a part of this pilot? And then we're going to build our own business unit through an apprenticeship program where we're going to test that out. And so right now we're talking to locally Goodwill. We're talking to some other brands here. We're even talking to like Victoria's Secrets and their ESG programs about, hey, we could take some of those old things that you haven't sold and turn them into new things, embellish them, and you can either put those back into your store or you can sell them through different channels, right? So we're testing that out now because, to your point, how do we fulfill that workforce? And a company that wants to move here, a manufacturer wants to move here, they want to know that that there's a workforce there for them. And so we're championing that, and that's what we're going to keep on driving. And that'll be actually happening inside of the loom. So we have Rework Labs, and so we're going to start and have our first 20 participants go through that program this year.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I love that you're on kind of the forefront still of like the secondhand market with the rework. That's great because that's a growing, exploding market that people are buying secondhand, but they don't always have the skill set to remake it or even to tailor it to fit them, things like that. And then obviously things that have been, damaged or, discarded along the way in its life cycle, but the, very usable material still left there.
A lot of it, right? And so we can, and that's what we look at our market as saying is that, do we want to try to do what New York is doing and LA? And they're so big and they're so large, the industry's so big that obviously you can't turn it as a whole entire industry, right? Like some people are in that space, but as a city that's kind of creating its own identity in this space, we're like, could that be one of the major pillars for us is to how to take old things or damaged things and keep them in the market because they're still valuable, they're still, really good clothing, and they may need some embellishments, they just may need a patch, it could be some other things. But I think we also can attract more industry by building that type of workforce, building a workforce that's not just built for making, but also built for keeping things in the world and not in the landfills.
Yeah, and also tackling the excess inventory problems I mentioned, and working with companies that have excess that they couldn't sell, and what are they going to do with that? A lot of that gets, landfill or incinerated, whatnot. So
Right,
I'm glad
right.
you're on the way with that solution. Sway is a really incredible company too for people to check out if they're not familiar.
Yeah. Super cool people over there. They're doing some really cool stuff with things that you couldn't imagine that they can make some cool clothes out of. They're making your long shorts out of lace, and they're making, really cool chore jackets out of towels. It's like,
Yeah.
the mind, all you need is a mind and a good set of hands, and you can create some amazing things.
Yeah, I think the factory workers, the sewists of today need to be super creative thinkers and not just, sitting cogs at a machine, sort of what we
Right.
traditionally think of as manufacturing. Like people do need the the skills of the machine, but they also need to be able to, autonomously think and create and come up with solutions.